I've made mention of this several times in Bible classes that we have here at Oceanside. What are the three fundamental questions that all men ask? Number one, where did we come from? Number two, why am I here? And number three, where am I going? Individuals want to know that. And in these lessons that we're going to be doing the entire month of June, we're going to be answering predominantly question number one. Where did I come from? Okay, where did I come from? This Vacation Bible School and the material that we're going to study, for some people, it's just as interesting as it can be. Okay? They just love it, and they just want more of it and more of it. And then there are some individuals who might think, you know, this almost isn't Bible study. This is too technical, or this is too difficult for us, and they don't enjoy it as much. I'll do my best to make it as enjoyable and as informative as I possibly can, I promise. And hopefully the other speakers will do that as well. Here's something that's interesting. Does the Bible ever attempt to prove there is a God? Not really. Now, there's some passages that make mention that there are evidences that there is a God, but the Bible just doesn't come out with this, several chapters trying to prove all these evidences that God exists. In fact, Moses begins with these words, "In the beginning, God." Isn't that interesting? Here's the very opening verse of the Bible, and Moses immediately assumes there is a what? There is a God. He doesn't stop and he doesn't say, "Now, let me prove that to you." Does he? No, he doesn't do that. When Moses wrote Genesis, had man been on the earth quite some time? Yeah, been here quite some time. Does anybody know about how long? About 2,500 years man had been on the earth. That's a long time, isn't it? That he'd been on the earth. So, we've already, man had already been created. Man had already gone through the flood. Man had already gone through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph. They've gone through a lot of stuff. They've gone through 400 years down in Egypt before Moses is ever born. Okay, so there's a lot of history. And so here Moses is, and he writes the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God. I just assume that you believe God exists. Okay? And, like I said, God doesn't... Now, God says that I've given you evidences, but God doesn't really try to prove that He exists. He does say there's evidences that are out there. What's one evidence that He makes mention of? What is it? Okay, creation. What part of creation? A specific part He makes mention of. Turn to Psalm 19. Psalm 19. Let's look at verses 1 through 3. Psalm 19, verses 1 through 3. And this is David who is writing, is it not? And this is David who is making these statements. What does he say? Who's got it? 19, 1 through 3.
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Wow,
there's a powerful statement. Now just think about that. David, what was David's first occupation? A shepherd, okay? So guess what? He was out in the field a lot, was he not? And he was subject to the heat of the sun every day, wasn't he? And at night, he would get his sheep all corralled up. He would sit on a hill overlooking them, and he would look up, and guess what he would see? The moon and the stars. And he says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth His handiwork. In other words, David says, when I look at the sun, the moon, and the stars, I know there's what? I know there's a God. Has to be a God. Okay? And he says these particular evidences of God are speaking all the time, aren't they? And he says that there's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Every human being upon the face of the earth, regardless of what culture, regardless of what race you speak or what language you speak, guess what? Everybody can look into the heavens and should walk away knowing that there is a God. In fact, Paul says that God has given enough evidence that not one person should ever stand before God with an excuse that I could not believe. Listen to what he says, Romans 1, 19 and 20. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of the creation of the world are clearly seen. Who's ever seen an invisible thing? And yet Paul says that's exactly what's happened. The invisible things of the world are clearly seen. I know there's a God. I know there's angels. I know there's a heaven. I know there's a Son of God that exists. I know there's a Holy Spirit that exists. How do I know that? Because of the things that are created. That's what he says, isn't it? Because the invisible things from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood, listen to him, by the things that are what? By the things that are made. Guys, this world should prove to anybody that there is a God in heaven. And he goes on to say this, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. The atheist is not going to be able to stand before God in the last day and say, God, there wasn't enough evidence for me to believe. God's going to shake his head. He's going to say, not so. I've given you tons of evidence. And guess where it is? It's in my creation. And if you reject that, guess what you are? What does the Bible say you are? A fool. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. Psalm 24, verse 1. Now, even though that's the case, guess what? We still have atheists, agnostics, skeptics, infidels, humanists, evolutionists who live right in our society today. Don't we? And here's what's interesting. They are not diminishing in number. They are increasing in number. That's amazing too, isn't it? Let me give you a couple of statistics. In 1991, 2% of the population were believed to be atheist, or at least said that they were. 2%. Okay, that was 1991. 2014, 3.1% claimed they were atheist. So we've gone up 1 full percent of the population, just a little bit over that, in those 15-year period. Okay, now watch this. 2018, 4 years. Now it is believed somewhere between 5 to 11% of the population are atheists in the United States of America. That's amazing, isn't it? We are not diminishing the number. The number just continues to grow and grow and grow and grow. And folks, let me tell you something. If things continue as they have in the past, that number is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Listen to this. I thought this was interesting. Who is it that makes up the groups of most atheists? Listen to this. 18 to 29-year-olds. Okay, there's more atheists in the 18 to 29-year-old group than any other age group. College graduates. And if you go into master's work, that number goes up even more. Number 3, males. Isn't that something? We old men. We don't need no God. Salary range, $100,000 and above. More atheists in that group than below. That's not surprising much, is it? Why is that not surprising? Yeah, they don't need God. They've got everything they need. They got enough money. They don't feel they don't feel the need to depend on anything because they can depend on who? Themselves. I like this one. Never married or living together. Isn't that something? Never married or living together. Individuals who live in metropolitan areas. What city in the United States do you think has the largest population of atheists? What'd you say? San Francisco. Somebody said New York. Anybody else? Chicago. What if I said Jacksonville? No, I'm kidding. I just wanted to see what you think, you know. San Francisco. San Francisco has the most atheists in it. Liberal political beliefs. Those with liberal political beliefs have more atheists in them than those with conservative political beliefs. Asians. Isn't that interesting? Asians. And then watch this. The Northeast, that's where? Yeah, the New England states, right? Okay, the New England states and the Western states. Isn't that something? The East Coast and the West Coast. That's not surprising, is it? That's where all the big whats are. That's where all the big cities are. That's where all the money is. That's where all the young people go, don't they? You see? And those are the kind of factors that are involved in atheism. I thought that was interesting. It helps us to determine who they are. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the origins of the universe. The origins of the universe. We have a booklet that they gave the teachers. Okay? And in that teacher's manual, he says, here's the purpose for Vacation Bible School this year. Listen to him. The purpose of this lesson and the ones to come are simply stated. In this VBS, our objective is to dismantle evolution and therefore prove the alternative, creation. Wow. We're going to what? Dismantle evolution. That's a pretty big project, is it not? And but it's really not that difficult. That's what's fun about it. Okay. Point number 1. As far as origins are concerned, there are only 2 alternatives. Either you are here naturally, or you are here supernaturally. Okay? Either you are here because there is a God, or you are here because nature evolved and eventually made you. Those are the only 2 alternatives that exist. Okay? And that makes it a little bit easier, does it not? Now the Bible is clear, is it not? As to origins. We've already talked about Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God created. Moses had no qualms about stating that, did he? In Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, Moses again makes an interesting statement about creation. In 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and, listen to him, all that in them is. In how many days? 6 days. Turn over to Psalm 33. I love this particular text. Psalm 33. Somebody read verses 6 through 9.
By the word of God, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made, and all the
Man, I love that 6th verse and 9th verse. Listen to it again. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them. How? By the breath of His mouth. God spoke, and what? It happened. Things came into existence. That's unbelievable. Notice verse 9 again. For He spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it what? Stood fast. Whatever God wanted animate or inanimate objects to do, they did. That's amazing to me. I can't even control myself sometime, much less everything else that is in the world. Can you imagine being able to speak to inanimate objects and they will do whatever you ask them to do? That's the power of the voice of God. So that's one alternative, creation. God did it. But then there's evolution, isn't it? Now, somebody give me a definition. I'm going to make it simple for you. A one-word definition of evolution. Change. See, the scientist, he's down here, okay? He has to show off a little bit, you know. Yes, change. Now, let me ask you this. Is there evolution in the world? Yes? Absolutely. There's evolution in the world, isn't there? Okay? And there's there's three big concepts of evolution that we need to understand. Okay? One of them is true. Okay? One of them is known as this, microevolution. Microevolution. When God created the world, He created a group, a category of things, and He referred to each one of those categories as kinds. Sometimes we have referred to them as species, okay? But really, it ought to be styled as kinds, okay? And as long as something is within the kind group, there can be change. If you take a fish that has eyes that can see, and you drop him into a pond of water in a cave where there is no light, eventually he will go what? He'll go blind. And guess what will happen? His offspring, when they are born, will be what? Blind. But guess what they still are? Fish. Can we crossbreed dogs? Oh yes. Got all kinds of dogs. You know, you got all these doodles today, don't you? Snickerdoodles and just all kinds of stuff, you know. And the people love to crossbreed dogs. But when you crossbreed a dog, what does it do? It stays a dog, doesn't it? Okay? You can't crossbreed dogs and cats. And eventually, you'll reach a line of demarcation. Eventually, you'll reach a line where, guess what? You cannot cross that anymore. Can horses and donkeys interbreed? Yes. They can interbreed, and guess what they produce? Mules. Okay? But that's as far as it goes, folks. Okay? And they're still a form of horses, aren't they? They're still equines. So there's a line where they cannot go any further. And that's called microevolution. Can we do that even within humanity itself? Oh, yeah. You know, well, just take when two individuals from different races marry. One is light-skinned, one is dark-skinned, and then they have children. Their children are what? A lot of time their children are a lighter skin than the darkest, but they're darker than the lighter skin. But they're still what? They're still human beings, aren't they? Okay? They're still human beings. And so there can be that microevolution, that change within the kinds. Okay, that's microevolution. But that's not the kind of evolution that the evolutionists in our world today are teaching. They are teaching what is known as macroevolution. Okay? Let me give you a definition of macroevolution. The origin of all living things through descent from common ancestors. We'll talk about it more in just a minute, okay? That's called macroevolution. It's also referred to as biological evolution. It's also referred to as Darwinian evolution. Where do evolutionists say you and I came from? Yeah, we always say apes, don't we? The primates, right? The apes. You see, that's a jump over what? That's a jump over the species. That's a jump over the kind line. And it really can't happen. Okay? A human being and an ape cannot produce any offspring. Okay? It's an impossibility because there's that line of demarcation. And yet, macroevolution says, oh yes, that did happen. In fact, that's happened for years and years and years and has happened ever since the very first living cells. There's been that constant process of change throughout history. And we're here now because of that. Now there's another kind of evolution. I thought this was interesting. It's called cosmic evolution. What do you think that means? Cosmic evolution. And that applies to our title for tonight's lesson. What do we say the title is? Now see, Glenn didn't remember that. He had written that down, that joker. Yes, the origins of the universe. Okay? They say that we are the product of something that happened in the cosmos billions of years ago. Cosmic evolution. Okay? It includes the Big Bang Theory, and it includes Darwinian evolution. Okay, so Darwinian evolution falls within the context of cosmic evolution. So, do we believe in evolution, change? Yes. We believe in microevolution, change within the kinds, change within the species. But we do not believe in macroevolution, and we do not believe in cosmic evolution. And tonight what we're talking about is cosmic evolution, and in particular, the Big Bang Theory. Okay, the Big Bang Theory. Now, let me ask you this. What is the Big Bang Theory? What is it? Anybody? Explosion of the atom. And see, that's really not even what they say, okay, which is, it's weird, okay, when you get into it. But what is it? It's not even an explosion of an atom. Atoms didn't even come on the scene till thousands and thousands and thousands of years after the Big Bang. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. Let me read you two words. Are you ready? A dense speck. Okay? A dense speck. Other individuals refer to it as a cosmic egg. Okay? Now the question is, of what was this speck, this little cosmic egg composed? Some type of exploding material. Okay? Some type of exploding material. 14, you ready for this? Billion years ago, we're told. 14 billion years ago. That little cosmic egg, that little dense speck, guess what happened to it? Hatched. Well, let me tell you something. If it hatched, it was one powerful hatch. Okay? Thank the Lord man wasn't there when it hatched. It exploded like crazy. Okay? Now watch this. For less than 1 second, that explosion traveled in all directions as fast as the speed of light. Okay? As fast as the speed of light. That's covering a lot of area. Okay? That's how powerful the explosion was. Particles. Okay? Material particles formed within seconds and minutes after the explosion. Here's a question, and be careful. Can energy produce matter? Yes, that is possible. Energy can produce matter. So you have this little stuff of energy way out there. It explodes, and all of a sudden it produces what? It starts producing matter in a matter of seconds. Now here's what Larry was talking about. Atoms formed 380,000 years after the explosion. The first stars formed 200 to 300 million years after the explosion. And here's the one that's interesting. Our solar system and Earth formed about 9 billion years after the explosion. When was the explosion? 14 billion years ago. Earth and the Milky Way galaxy did not come into existence until what? 9 million years after that. Okay? So that means we were what? Yeah, this galaxy has only been here for 5 billion years. Just 5 billion years. Unbelievable. So that talks about how our galaxy got here. From the time of the explosion till the time our galaxy gets here. Now watch this. Let's start with life. Okay? And let's work backwards. Life formed some 3.8 billion years ago. Okay? So the earth was here quite some time, developing, evolving, before life ever made it to this planet. Okay? So the solar system and earth were here, and there was no life for several billion years. And finally, 3.8 billion years ago, life formed on earth. Now watch this. Single cells to multi-cells to plants. Plants to invertebrates. Invertebrates to vertebrates. Fish to amphibians to reptiles. To dinosaurs to mammals to primates. Ultimately to man. And how long have we been here? Anybody know? According to the evolutionists, 2 to 3 million years. One man made this statement: man is a relatively newcomer to the earth, according to to the evolutionists. We have not been here that long. 2 to 300 million years. Unbelievable, isn't it? Now, let's look at what Moses tells us, okay? Go back again to Exodus 20:11. Somebody read it for us. Exodus 20, verse 11. I'm going to show you something. What we're going to do right now is we're going to show you the contrast between what evolutionist says and what creation in the Bible says. They do not harmonize, folks. They cannot be harmonized, all right?
For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. 6 what? Days. Now you can test this theory if you want to, okay, if you got a little bit of reading time tonight. Every time you read the word day and it has a number beside it. 10 days, 14 days, 30 days, 100 days. Every time a number is beside the word days in the Bible, it always refers to a 24-hour day. Always. Isn't that interesting? Now, why is that important? Because of what's said in Genesis chapter 1. Listen to Genesis 1 verse 5. And the evening and the morning were the first, what? Day. A number is placed beside the what? The word day. The evening and the morning were the first day, indicating a 24-hour day. 6 24-hour days, and this earth was created. Now, we made mention a while ago that there's some big differences between evolution and creation. Between evolution and Genesis 1. Evolution says this: the stars were formed before the earth. What does Genesis 1 say? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And, verse 2, the earth was without form and void. Folks, all that was done on day 1. Okay? When did the stars come into existence? Day 4. Okay? Day 4. So, Genesis says, oh no! Earth was created before what? Before the stars. It's just the opposite when you talk about the theory of evolution. Number 2, according to the theory of evolution, the earth was a hard, molten object at first. God said it was what? It was a wet, milky, murky substance at first, didn't He? And the earth was without form and void. What else does the text say? Who's got it? Genesis 1:2. Huh? Darkness was upon the face of the deep. And? Yes, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Folks, the earth was a murky, messy substance when God first created it. Okay? Because there's going to come a time when He creates land, doesn't He? And guess what He's going to do? He's going to call all the waters into one place. And He's going to separate the dry land from the waters. And He's going to make sea and He's going to make earth, isn't He? But you see, at first, it's all just a milky, murky substance. Evolution says, oh no, that's not the way it was. Earth was first just a hard, molten object out there. Number 3, evolution says that the sun came before plants. And guess what the Bible says? Plants came before the sun. Okay? Plants on day 3, sun on day 4. Okay, here's another one. Evolution says dinosaurs came before man. Know what the Bible says? Man and dinosaurs were contemporaries. They lived together with one another. Does that just baffle some people's minds? Oh yes. That's exactly what happened on day 6, is it not? Day 6. Here's something that's interesting. Evolution says this: man was not on this planet until long after the Big Bang. You know what God says? Oh no. Man was created at the very beginning of the creation. Okay? At the very beginning of the creation. That's found in Mark's Gospel, and we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Now, there are some individuals who look at creation, and there's some individuals who look at evolution, and they think, both of them seem to be true. And so what they have done is they have created a whole other field of study entitled theistic evolution. Now, somebody define theistic evolution. Anybody?
They try to fit evolution into the creation.
Okay, they try to fit evolution into the creation.
Evolution was used by God.
Okay, yes, God used evolution to bring everything into its present state. Okay, another good definition. Anybody else? Theistic evolution.
It's characterized by belief in existence of God.
A what now?
You said theistic?
Yes, theistic evolution.
Yeah, it's characterized by belief in existence of God or gods.
Okay, yeah, these individuals, they look around and they say, you know, life is here. Man is made in the image of God. So there has to be a what? There has to be a God. But they also look at many of the evidences, and I put that in quotation mark, of evolution, and they say, but, you know, there's a lot of evidence that what? Evolution took place. So maybe, just maybe, God used evolution to bring everything into being as it is today. And we can have what? Both. Evolution and God. Well, we've already made mention of the fact that Genesis 1 and evolution do not harmonize, do they? It's an impossibility. Turn over. There's two theories of theistic evolution. Does anybody know what they are? Two main theories. Nobody knows. Now, folks, you got to know this stuff. Okay, because somebody may come along teaching this stuff. Okay?
It says here it's a religion such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
Number one, the gap theory. Turn over to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. Now remember, they try to work evolution into the creation account, right? Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God did what? Created the heaven and the earth. In other words, God created the entirety of the universe. Now what does verse 2 say? And the earth was without form and void. You see that little word, was? They go into the Hebrew and they say, you know, that word can be translated became. And the earth did what? Became without form and void. So there was a time when God created the entirety of the earth, and the earth evolved and the earth developed, and it took billions and billions of years, and then all of a sudden, guess what happened? Some big catastrophic event took place, and the earth became without form and void. And God started all over and then used the 6 days of creation to bring to pass what we have today. But the reason you can look into the geological records and other things and see evolution is because there used to be a what? There used to be a world before this one came into being. So the gap theory is one of their theories. What's another theory? Yes, the day-age theory. Okay? In other words, the days of Genesis 1 are not what? 24-hour days. They are long geological periods of time. Millions and millions of years within each one of those days. And that accounts for what? The evolution to occur. The day-age theory. Now, I've already given you one argument against that, haven't I? What is it?
The word with the number is always 24 hours.
Yes. Every time you find the word day with a number, it's always a 24-hour day. We have 6 days. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. And every one of them are what? 24-hour days. There's never an exception to that in all of Scripture, folks. Okay? So that's one argument against it. According to evolution, you have this. You have the Big Bang, And then almost 14 billion years later, you have man created, don't you? Turn to Mark's Gospel for just a minute. Yeah, Mark. Hey. Okay, Mark 10, verse 6. We're almost done here. Mark 10, verse 6. Jesus says this, from the beginning of the creation, God made what? Male and female. Folks, man did not come along billions of years after the Big Bang. Man was created at the very beginning of what? Of the creation. God started creating on day 1, 5 days later, on day 6, man came into being. Okay? From the very beginning of the creation, God created man. Let's assume for a moment that those days in Genesis 1 are long periods of time. Okay? Do plants need light in order to live? Yes. Guess when plants were created? Day 3. When was the sun created? Day 4. If you don't have the sun on earth, you don't have what? You don't have light, do you? Okay? So no photosynthesis can take place. So here you've got these plants dwelling in darkness for a long geological period of time without any what? Without any sunlight. How are they going to live? It's an impossibility. Question, do plants also need pollination in order to live? What is it that pollinates plants? Insects, some birds. We call those winged creatures, do we not? Guess when they were created? Day 5. So now we got 2 long geological periods of time until pollination can occur. Folks, by the time the sun was created and by the time pollination occurred, every one of those plants would have already been what? Dead, if the day-age theory were true. It's a false theory, just as crazy as it can be. Okay? All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. Got a couple more points to make to you, and then we'll stop. A while ago, Larry mentioned to me that when we're talking to an evolutionist and we bring up the Bible, the very thing that they will say to us is, I don't believe what? I don't believe the Bible. Okay, I don't believe the Bible. Well, what we're about to do is we're not going to convince the atheist of anything. We believe the Bible, right? One of the things that they'll tell us, though, is this. The first 11 chapters of Genesis are myth. By that, they mean this. It is fictitious stories designed to teach some big, broad principles, okay? God created. God made everything. But the 6 literal days, that's not really true, okay? Man sinned, right? But a snake talking to a woman in a tree, that's just a story so that you'll remember that sin came into the world. All these stories that are in those first 11 chapters are not true. And remember, those first 11 chapters include the flood, do they not? 6, 7, and 8 include the flood. So the flood is in that particular group of chapters as well. Here's what's interesting. In the New Testament, every one of those 11 chapters are mentioned. And they are mentioned like they are historical fact. In other words, they really did occur. Okay? Turn over to Matthew 19, verse 4. Matthew 19, verse 4, and just read that. We'll just read a couple of these. I've got all 11 chapters in my notes, but it would take us forever to go through all of them. Who's got it?
But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, why do you think evil in your heart?
Is that Matthew 19, 4? 19, 4.
And he answered and said unto them, have you not read that which was made at the beginning, made them male and female?
Guess where that's found? Genesis chapter 1. Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? Guess who's talking? Jesus is talking. And guess what Jesus said? He that made them at the beginning, Genesis 1, made them male and female. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Jesus believed that Genesis 1 was real, literal history. Okay? No doubt about it. Now, stay right there and somebody read Matthew 19:5. Nobody can read? All breaks make people illiterate. What? Go for it.
And said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh.
Folks, that is a direct quote almost of Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. A direct quote from Genesis chapter 2. Jesus believed in Genesis chapter 1. Jesus believed in Genesis chapter 2. And he thought that they were real, literal, actual history. No. So, in other words, what I'm saying is this. If you say Genesis 1 and 2 are a myth, then you are laughing in the face of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, because He believed they were real history. Turn over to 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11, verse 3. This is Paul writing. Who's got it? 2 Corinthians 11, 3.
But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ.
Isn't that something? But I fear, Paul said. What did he fear? As the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety. What's he talking about? Genesis what? Genesis chapter 3. And even used the word what? The serpent did it. Paul believed that a literal serpent talked to who? Talked to Eve. Now, folks, if you don't believe that, if you think that's a myth, then guess what? You have to reject the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Let's look at another one. Turn over to Hebrews 11:5. Hebrews 11:5.
By faith Enoch was translated that he did not see death and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation he had his testimony that he knew God.
Who's he talking about? Enoch, isn't he? Let's go back and read Genesis chapter 5 tonight, and guess who you're going to read about? You're going to read about Enoch. And guess what you're going to read? You're going to read that Enoch was translated, that God took him from off the face of the earth. The writer of Hebrews believed what was written in Genesis chapter 5 was real and literal. By faith, Enoch was translated, was he not? Turn over to, let's look at Genesis 11, verse 30. Somebody just read that verse real quick. Genesis 11:30. What does it say? Okay, Sarah was barren and had no child. That's Genesis what? That's Genesis 11. Again, Genesis 1 through 11, they claim to be myth. Okay, now somebody turn over and read Romans 4, verse 19. Romans 4, verse 19.
And being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead, when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb.
Did Paul believe in the barrenness of Sarah's womb? Oh yeah, he wrote about it, did he not? Over in Romans chapter 4, verse 19. Folks, these are real historical facts in Genesis chapters 1 through 11. They are not fiction. They are not mythical in any shape, form, or fashion. If you believe that they are, then you're going to have to laugh in the face of divinely inspired men in the New Testament who recorded those things as if they were fact in history. Okay, so don't let anybody fool you into believing that our Bibles, our New Testaments, are not, our Old Testament is not the truth and is not historical fact. Okay, questions or comments? I'm about to do something that we're going to fly through real quick. Okay, the writers of our lesson have given us 8 problems with the Big Bang Theory. Okay, and if you can remember 1 or 2 of these, then you'll be in good shape. Okay, you'll be in good shape. So I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 of them, and if we have more time, we'll talk about some more of them, all right? First of all is this, and this was one of the big ones. True or false? Our world has laws that it operates by. Is that true? Yes. There's all kinds of laws, are there not? In fact, I just looked up and I just Googled it. I said, what are some of the laws of science that exist in our world today? Laws of universal gravitation, laws of motion, laws of thermodynamics, electrostatic laws, the conservation of mass and energy. And what's interesting is, under each one of those sections sometime were 3 or 4 other principles and laws that we could talk about. We could just go on forever about the number of laws that exist. Now, what do these laws do? Yeah, they govern the universe. Okay, they govern the universe. Now the question is this: where did those laws come from? Nature, here's a statement you need to remember. Nature does not write laws. Okay? Intelligence writes laws. Not nature. Nature can't write a law. Anybody know who Stephen Hawking is? Okay? He was a big evolutionist, wasn't he? Okay? Remember he was the guy in the wheelchair? I want you to listen to a quote that he made. He says this: well, where did the laws of physics come from? That's where we might find some form of God. Isn't that interesting? See, even Stephen Hawking knew that nature can't write laws. So in his mind, he kept asking himself the question, where did these laws come from? Did he live by those laws? Oh yes, as a scientist, he lived by those laws. He believed in those laws. He knew those laws exist. But the question that he asked was, where did they come from? And he was honest enough to admit that right there is where we might find God. But guess what? He never accepted God. And he threw it into the realm of mystery. It's a mystery. And we'll never know the answer to the mystery. Isn't that something? You'd rather believe in a mystery than you would believe in the almighty, eternal God. And the moment he died, he learned real quick where those laws came from. You know it? Real quick. So that's one, laws don't write themselves. Laws come from intelligence. Okay? Number 2, the origin of mass and energy. Okay, the origin of mass and energy. Remember we said there was a dense speck out there in the universe. So the first question that you ask an evolutionist is this: where did we come from? And you know what they say? From a dense speck. From a cosmic egg. And so you ask them the second question: where did the dense speck come from? Where did that cosmic egg come from? And guess what? They have no answer. No answer. If they say, well, it came from energy, well, the next question is what? Where did the energy come from? Right? See, you either believe in an eternal God or you believe in eternal matter. Now, which is the more logical to believe in? Matter that cannot create life, or a living God who can create life? It takes more faith to believe in evolution than it ever does to believe in the theory of creation and the Almighty God. So the origin of matter. Can something ever come from nothing? It's an impossibility, isn't it? So if there's something here, something had to always be here. Because if there's ever a time that nothing existed, then nothing would still exist today. That's a mouthful, isn't it? I couldn't even repeat that if I wanted to. Here's another one. The inflation problem. Now remember a while ago I talked about that Big Bang and how powerful that Big Bang was, right? That Big Bang traveled at the speed of light for just less than a second. But guess what? It kept going further and further and further out. Let me ask you something. If you were to set off a grenade and it exploded, would it explode outward? Yes. And guess what would eventually happen? It would eventually stop, wouldn't it? Okay? Eventually, regardless of how powerful it was, there eventually comes a time when it stops. Well, when evolutionists have studied the universe, guess what's happening? It just keeps going and going and going and going. Okay? So they've got a problem with what they call inflation, this acceleration of the earth, because it's not stopping. Okay? And they have absolutely, no real way to account for that. Very, very interesting. Well, I say they don't. Let me give you this fourth one. You ready? Okay? They believe in something that's called dark energy. Okay? They believe that there's an energy force. It occupies over 70% of the cosmos. And this dark energy force is what's causing the universe to continue to expand. I want you to listen to something. You ready? Presumably, an unknown, unobserved, and possibly unobservable energy in space, an energy thought to make up 73% of the universe, but which we do not know exists, is driving the acceleration. There you go. We don't know why it's continuing to expand, so let's do what? Let's just make up something. Dark energy's doing it. Well, have you ever seen it? No. Can you see it? No. Do you really know it's out there? No, but it's out there. Isn't that unbelievable? It takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to believe in who? In God. Does anybody remember when the Twin Towers fell? You know, it was bad enough to watch those planes hit those towers, wasn't it? But what was even worse is after they had burned and burned and burned, and then all of a sudden that one tower just came tumbling down, didn't it? Okay? When that tower came tumbling down, what happened? Okay? Yeah, it killed a lot of people. But there was a huge cloud of dust, wasn't there? And guess what that dust did? That dust expanded all over the city, didn't it? Okay? But guess what? It did so homogeneously. What does that mean? Anybody know? That's a big word, isn't it? Yeah, it was the same everywhere. Okay? Now, right where the Twin Tower was, there was tons of dirt and debris, wasn't there? And as it spread out, it what? It spread out exactly the same in every direction. It was homogeneous. It was smooth. Okay, now remember, we had a Big Bang, right? And that Big Bang should have spread out homogeneously, shouldn't it? It should have spread out smoothly throughout the entirety of the universe. But guess what we don't have? We don't have a smooth universe. We have stars and planets and galaxies that are in clumps. They are not smoothly scattered throughout the entirety of the cosmos. Guess what? The evolutionist can't explain it. It's not smooth. They're in clumps. So just ask them, hey, is the universe in clumps or is it smooth? They're going to quit talking to you. If they try to explain it, say, well, after you get through explaining that, then I need you to tell me about that dark energy. Oh, y'all, you've been down there that VBS at Oceanside, hadn't you? Okay. Unbelievable, isn't it? Anybody ever heard of this? The Fermi problem? F-E-R-M-I. Fermi? Nobody? Some refer to it as the Fermi paradox. Nobody's heard about it. Okay. Remember, there was a big explosion, right? And about 3.8 billion years ago, right, life formed on the earth. Now remember, the explosion is supposed to be what? Homogeneous. It's supposed to be the same all the way around. So when life developed here, in that circle, life should have developed all the way around it, should it not? If everything's the same, if everything's identical, as all of this stuff is spreading out, when life formed here, it should have started forming all the way around that circle. 1950, an Italian physicist whose last name was Fermi was talking to some other physicists and other scientists. And they got to talking about this concept, okay, that life started. And if the explosion was homogeneous as it should have been, then there should be life in a lot of places. And that physicist by the name of Fermi, he asked this question: where is everybody? Have we ever found extraterrestrial beings, aliens, anywhere in the universe? They ought to be everywhere, folks. You know that? They ought to be circling the universe. If what? If evolution is true. I'm going to read you some things. The earth has a slight tilt and teeters like a top as it spins, which can cause drastic shifts in climate over a course of thousands of years. But because of the moon's stabilizing effect on our orbit, our climate is a lot more steady. Stable rotation. There's no reason to think that a planet without a stable rotation would be completely inhabitable. Actually, some people think such eyeball planets could be our best bet for aliens. But the regularity and the frequency of day and night on this planet go far to prevent extreme temperatures and encourage life. Magnetic field. Our planet is blessed with a strong, stable magnetic field, which staves off the cosmic rays and solar flares that would otherwise fry the planet every now and then. It is also tied up with the next must-have feature on the list, dynamic geology. The cloud of gas and dust that eventually coalesced into the earth contained enough radioactive elements to keep the core of this planet churning merrily for billions of years. Do you hear that? The person writing this is not a creationist. The person who is writing this was an evolutionist. But the reason we're reading it is because he says that there is order and there is design in the universe. that our earth is perfectly suited for life. And he just keeps going. He talks about the atmosphere. He talks about the isolation of the earth. He talks about the long-lived sun. He talks about the gas of a giant neighbor. Anybody ever heard of Saturn and Jupiter? Folks, those planets, especially Jupiter, has a tremendous amount of gases that surround them and cause an unbelievable magnetic pull toward those planets. And guess what that does? Draws things toward it. Keeps comets and other things from coming and hitting our earth. Just happens to be out there to protect the earth so that we don't get all that stuff. And he even makes mention of that. Here is a planet that's out there that saves the earth from these things. And he's not a Christian who wrote that. He's an evolutionist. Folks, if there's design in the earth, that means there has to be a what? A designer. Every house is builded by some man. But he that built all things is who? God. Hebrews 3 verse 4. Isn't it funny? We see a house built, we know a man built it, don't we? We look at the universe and especially our earth and how perfect it is for life. And individuals say, oh no, it just happened. I wrote an article not long ago for a post, for my Facebook post, and it was entitled, An Explosion in a Chocolate Factory. There has never been an explosion in a chocolate factory that ever produced a candy store. Isn't that true? Never has happened. And it will never happen. Explosions don't create order, they create chaos. The Big Bang, if it happened, would not have created this orderly world in which we lived. It would have created chaos. Find it interesting what Isaiah says in Isaiah 45:18, For thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it, he hath created it not in vain. He created it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is none else. Folks, God created this earth for man to live on until such time that he's going to destroy it and take his people home with him. We believe in what? Creation, not what? Not evolution. It's a farce, and we need to teach our kids that. And sadly, they're not being taught that in our school systems anymore. Questions, comments? We're done.
You know, they're talking about killing 180,000 cows to fit climate change.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I just hope they'll send the meat